Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you for spending a few minutes out of your evening here with me and my special guest, and we will get right into this interview. He's a vintage computing hobbyist, an electrical engineering wizard, and likely knows the last time that lightning struck your house. TechKnight. TechKnight,
Hey,
how are you doing?
everybody? How's everybody this evening?
Hopefully everybody's doing well. I know that it's kind of been a busy summer, and I am sure that people are
It's
coming
been a
back from
hot one.
events. Yeah, that too. I'm really hoping that there's a break in the weather here sometime later this week, because we've had upper 90s a couple of days, and it's no fun at all.
It's been in the 90s here in the mountains too, and for about a month and a half now, my electric bill definitely reflects that.
I had to say something the other day because I said, I prepaid $200 on the electrical bill this month, and they came back and they wanted more money. We're gonna have to figure out how to not die, but then also save money. I'm not sure how we're gonna do it, but we'll figure it out, I guess.
I mean, it's better than my winter bills because my winter bills are near $400 a month.
Mm,
Because
that's
I don't have gas heat. It's all electric.
yeah,
So
all electric. Yeah.
it's like 60 kilowatt heat strips. It's insane.
Oh yeah.
Yep. We don't have gas down here, not here in the mountains.
No. It's I used to live in South Carolina as a kid. I just remember absolutely everything's
Right.
electric, and you didn't really need a lot of the gas stuff. We had like one snow day ever, and
Yeah,
it was because there was like
rare.
a dusting. Yeah, it's
Yep,
just so
it's
rare.
Even up here, it's rare. We get one snow maybe every couple years.
Mhm.
It's rare.
Yeah. Well, for folks at home who don't know you or aren't familiar with your storied place in this vintage computing hobby, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm an electrical engineer. I've been doing this stuff since I've been 9 years old. And that was 30 years ago now, is when I first picked up a soldering iron and I started learning how to do this stuff for the first time. And back in those days, I was hyper fixated on just electronics. Electronics was just my life in general. And even at that time, I didn't know what a computer was at all. I didn't understand them. I never even had any experience with it. But it didn't stop me from learning about electronics because back then, I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate with this. It's like you had your Radio Shack spring kits where you could build your blinking LED stuff. And that's what I was into back then. And I remember Dad got me a stack of college level how to troubleshoot electronics and repair books and stuff like that. And then that is exactly how I got into electronics in general. I just fell right into it. It was essentially, with me being on the spectrum, it was a hyper fixation. It's just something that I was deeply passionate in, and that's what drove my life essentially. And then later on, computers just tangentially became a part of that life. And Bob's your uncle. That's basically where I am today. And it was a journey, I'll say that, and it's a continuing journey. Learned a lot and continue to learn as time goes on.
That's good. And it's good that you had folks that were interested, kind of that they recognized that this was something you were very interested in. I was lucky as a kid. I would go to the mall and the little Radio Shack there. There were a couple of like older dudes that worked there that they would come in
Radio
and
Shack was my childhood.
they would photocopy stuff out of Rainbow for me.
Yes, I had a very if I can pinpoint one thing to my childhood, that was my fifth grade teacher. My fifth grade teacher at the time had a husband who was also an electrical engineer who worked for the local community TV station known as TV Hamilton. I don't know if it exists anymore because I grew up in Hamilton, Ohio, and they had their own TV station, TV Hamilton. Well, he was the engineer at the station. So it's like, hey, because she picked up on the fact that I had this hyper fixation in electronics to the point to where it was kind of distracting in my schoolwork because I had a hard time focusing in school and stuff like that because I would be in school and I'm supposed to learn the Huckleberry Finn novel or all of this other stuff. But I was thinking, well, how does an electron flow in this transistor and how does it work with this? This is what my brain was doing. So she picked up on that. It's like, hey, I'd like you to meet my husband, who's an electrical engineer. And he gave me a tour. We went out to dinner. He gave me a tour of the station and all this other electronic stuff he gave me and tailored to that. But also, I got gift certificates to Radio Shack back then, too. And this is how you turn on a child's heart, right? Especially when they're addicted to electronics like that. And I have mentors like that in my life that I can thank from a young age that got me really snowball. And she was smart as a teacher too, because being on the spectrum and trying to get through a hyperfixation and learning other subjects around that is really difficult. But what she actually would do is try to figure out a way to relate what I'm supposed to learn in class, how it ties into what I want to do with or how I'm learning with electronics. Math was a big one for that because I had a hard time doing, math formulas or whatever, solving for the variables because you just start to learn that stuff in 5th grade. And she's like, well, bring in, Mr. Wilson, her husband. The teacher's like, well, here's Ohm's law. Here's how it works with a resistor, how current has a relationship with voltage, all of that, and then how that applies to the current math lesson of the day. And it's like, oh, she was smart with that. I don't know if you see that much these days, but she was really good with that. And trust me, it worked. So, hey, sometimes it works. It's like if a person has a learning disability or hyperfixation, well, what you do is you tailor to it. Then you find the pathway to where you need to go. It works. Trust me, it does.
Absolutely. So, and I come from a long line of educators, and I work in higher education myself, and I absolutely understand that. As a STEM enthusiast and someone that has taught STEM kind of to younger kids.
Yeah.
It's that's so important, being able to kind of bridge that and make things where, especially kids that are like, I don't really care about this. I don't understand what this has to do with anything. It's like, it's got to do with everything.
Or if you got attention issues where it's like, I can't focus on that because my attention is here, it's like the teacher picks up on that. It's like, hey, well, I know you like that. Let me relate to that by using that as a gateway and injecting this into it. And that's how it's done. And I don't know. I'm sure it's probably done today too, but back then that was like the only teacher I ever had who was capable of doing that. And it was quite honestly amazing.
Well, and it probably, again, it comes down to what resources you have. And so she had her husband there, and she had the forethought that it's like, hey, here's how we reach this student. Here's how we reach you, where you get to where you live, and then help you get the tools you need to learn. So that's amazing, man. I love hearing stories like that.
Exactly. It's like help you understand, in your world, how this other stuff that may not seem relevant really is relevant and why you need to learn the lessons, and it definitely helps. So that's when I had to do reading lessons, I started picking books out of the library instead of, Huckleberry Finn. I was reading Michael Faraday books because it relates to what I was learning, but it's the same thing, it's still a book report. I'm still doing my lessons, but I'm learning the important history of how we got here, that kind of thing.
Well, the as someone, I couldn't get enough of reading. I couldn't get enough of library time when I was in school. I was one of those kids too, who were just like, they would just go and get like the reference books or go get weird, like what people would consider weird stuff. That would be the stuff that I like to read. But at my school, we literally, when I was in grade school, we had one Apple II computer. I tell the story all the time. I won't bore people about it here, but it was basically how I showed other people the neat stuff you could do, and then I never got time on that computer again because everybody booked time on the machine. But do you have a similar story with getting started in computers, or was it family that got you involved?
Well, here's how the computer thing started. So in 4th grade, we had an Apple II that was kind of like sitting over here in the classroom, but the teacher really didn't do any lessons with it or didn't do anything on it. And I remember it's weird for me because at that time I had one of those like VTech pre-computer power pad toys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the couple programs that Mrs. Cases actually ran on that machine were very similar. So I didn't associate that Apple II as a computer.
Mm-hmm.
My child brain was like, "Oh, well, this is just a toy thing," because it was too close to my VTech pre-computer power pad. I didn't realize it was a computer. But what ended up happening was the following year in 5th grade, this is right when our school finally started to get computers in, because this was the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember in 5th grade, starting that year, in the back of the classroom was a Power Macintosh 5200 with a HP DeskWriter 660C color printer and one of those little external lacy white vertically tall hard drives with the little Apple logo on top, one of those.
Yeah.
And I was always fascinated, like, what in the world is that thing? And I remember I got on that thing for the first time. This was in late 96. I got on that thing for the first time, and I'm just like, holy crap. It was System 7.5 something, pretty sure back then. And it's like, whoa, I was so captivated of being able to see all of these UI controls and the mouse and running these programs and stuff like that. And then I was just like mesmerized with all of this. And then once again, my teacher's husband coming in clutch, so he brought in a disc to school one day, and this disc contained a shareware copy of a program called Mac Breadboard. So remember, I'm in the world of electronics and electronics kits and stuff like that. So when he stuck the Mac Breadboard program in the computer and ran it, I got this little Radio Shack electronics kit on screen. And that was one of my first tools that I interacted with on a computer. And that's what bridged the connection, and where I just became completely obsessed with this thing. And then we didn't have computers at home or anything like that. So, and then I got so mesmerized on it that the teacher ended up having to pull me away as punishment because I started slipping on not doing assignments when I was supposed to.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I had a friend of mine, Nick, whose mom was throwing away an IBM 5155, portable PC. And she's like, "Hey, do you want this? Otherwise, we're going to throw it away." And I'm like, "Sure." So she drops it off at my house, and it's just a computer with a box of floppy disks. And I was, of course, attached to it. Mom was like, "Hey, you need to wait for your dad to come home from work before you mess with that. Hey, I want your dad to look at it for that." That wasn't going to work. I was already messing with it. So I remember it would kept powering on to non-system disk or disk error, and I didn't understand what that meant. So I was feeding it disk after disk after disk until eventually I found a disk that threw a bunch of stuff up on the screen, and it dropped me to an A prompt. And I'm like, what do I do here? Started typing in random stuff on the keyboard, and it was giving me like bad command or file name or whatever. And I'm like, I'm lost. I'm used to this point and click mouse thing that I had at school. It's like, what is this? I was still fascinated with it, but it's like, but eventually Dad was also fascinated with it. And then that's what prompted him. Christmas of that year, he went on, I think it was classifieds in the newspaper. Remember that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Before Facebook Marketplace. So classifieds in the newspaper, and he bought an IBM PS2 Model 30 complete machine for like, I don't know, $50 or something like that, and gave it to me as a Christmas present. Except that one came with all the software, it was working, and it had all the books with it, which was reading material for me to learn what was going on. And I was lost with that for hours too, because I started playing on BBSs and stuff like that, downloading games. But I also read that DOS for Dummies and an IBM DOS 5.0 manual front to back. And that's when I went back to that IBM 5155. Like, hey, well, now I know some of these commands. Let's figure out what's going on. And that's when I realized the hard drive was bad in that machine because I couldn't format it, kept giving me general failures and seek failures. And I remember running Fdisk is one of the manual chapters we're talking about, and it kept saying error, reading fixed disk. And I'm like, well, it's basically dead. So I ended up, as kids do, 12-year-old, 11-year-old kid, I tore the thing apart into many pieces to figure out how it all worked and what made it tick, and took the chips off, and it basically snowballed from there. And then eventually the 286 died and it wouldn't read discs anymore. And Dad bought the 386, which was my first venture on the internet, a 386 with Windows 3.1 and AOL 3.0 in the spring of 97. That was a little rough, but we didn't know any better, right?
Right.
But eventually that summer, he bought a CTX computer, brand spanking new, with Windows 95. And I remember it reminded me of the whole Macintosh thing at school. And I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. And it just snowballed from there with thrift store machines, with, machines my teachers gave me in middle school and things like that. That's how I got into Macs at home, because my first Mac was a Mac Plus that was from the thrift store for $8.99. And it didn't have a keyboard, didn't have a mouse, and it just powered up with a blinking floppy. And I remember staring at the screen like, what is that? What do I do here? What does that mean? And as bad as it is to admit this, I remember sneaking into school one day when nobody was looking, and I saw the System 7 folder binder with the discs in it. And I saw the discs, and I just kind of like, I wonder if they would notice that missing when I shoved them in my backpack. I was probably 12 at the time. So I shoved that in my backpack and I took it home. And I remember feeding disc after disc after disc in the Plus, and it just kept spinning them back out with an X. Well, little did I realize you got 800K versus high density.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of that back then. These were high density discs. So I'm like, I can't get this to work. And I'm like, well, I can't take the discs back to school without getting caught. So forgive me. So I don't know.
Well, I think the statute of limitations is out on that anyway.
Yeah,
so
probably.
You're probably safe.
So if my teachers are watching this and you're a member of those discs were missing, that's why they're missing this guy. Yeah. So yeah, that was my venture into computing anyways. So
but that's a similar story to a lot of people, where it's just sort of people took an interest and helped you get access to machines or access to just computing experiences.
Exactly.
And that's what kind of everything went from there.
What it is. It's adults, like people that are our age now, looking at these young kids, and they're seeing a sparked interest in something. It's like, hey, I got all this extra stuff here. Let me help you out here. I'll just give you all of this stuff. Or, hey, you just want to have fun with it and learn. And, and it's always the educators that do that, because I remember when middle school, I got a special ed teacher, and he was like that. He would give me pretty much just everything to give it to me. And I remember a elementary school counselor, Mrs. Scheckman, she gave me a brand new in the box Sanyo 5035 cassette deck. She's like, here, I'm just going to throw this away. Do you want it? It's things like that. But the thing is, it's like, we as adults, we do that. We kind of feel good about it, but we don't really think much about it, but as a child, when you get that stuff, it's like, it just makes your day. It's just like your entire world is like, oh my God, that kind of thing. And that's how it was. Mr. Baumholt, which my IT teacher in middle school was like that. He gave me, because I remember when I got into 68K Macs, they were already obsolete by that point, because this was the late 90s, where everything had moved to PowerPC at that point. The latest internet browser, Internet IE5, wouldn't run on a 68K. IE4 on the Quadra series was already having problems loading Java virtual machine and JavaScript stuff, and Flash stuff wouldn't load, things like that, because the web was moving rapidly back then, right? It still kind of is. So it's like, well, but even though this stuff was being thrown into the e-waste pile for the school processing to take care of and get rid of, Mr. Baumholt would sneak a few off of the the skid and give them to some of the kids in the IT class.
Mhm.
And I remember I got the Power Mac 6100, which was my first Power PC. And I'm like, it was like a whole new world to me. But he saw that I had a vetted interest in computing. He's
Mhm.
like, hey, I volunteer at an organization called Full Circle Group, which is a computer reuse recycler company that of 501c3 that was in Woodlawn, Ohio. They're gone now. They got absorbed into Cincinnati Computer Cooperative. But back when it was Full Circle Group, it was like, hey, you know what they do, their mission statement is they get retired machines from corporations and stuff like that. They refurbish them, the ones that they can refurbish, and they get sent to schools that can't afford new computers, or they get sent to special needs kids or low income families, things like that. And I liked the mission statement. Plus, I wanted to learn some more. So Mr. Baumholt's like, hey, we do this. It's every weekend on Saturday from 9 to noon. Weekday nights at like 6 to 9, things like that. And he's like, hey, you should volunteer. And it's like, that sounds great. Convinced mom, which got my uncle involved, to drive me there. And it was like a whole new world. I learned so much there because I learned Norton Ghost, multicast.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
Mhm. That's a
learn
throwback,
Mac.
but yeah.
Yes, because Mr. Baumholt was the Mac guy there, and him and Dave. Dave was the calculus teacher at University of Kentucky, I think it was at the time, and he was a big Mac nut too. And he's the one that got me a copy of the Apple Legacy Recovery CD and all this other stuff. And it's like I learned so much working on Mac stuff with those guys. I learned so much with Dave and a few of the others working on the PCs, and it was such a fun experience. So that was my early life in computing. And then of course I got all the 68K machines back in the late 90s, very early 2000s. That was my first time into retro. I guess technically it wasn't really retro, but it was obsolete.
Right.
That was my first experience with computers. And then I got out of it for a while and I got rid of all of that stuff because I had to try to keep ahead of the times. I always had like a PC and a hand-me-down Mac, like a beige G3 by 2003 for playing around with. And then due to some unforeseen life circumstances in 2007, right about that time, I was trying to figure out, I just early into adulthood, having hormonal shifts, depression, the whole thing. It's like you're becoming an adult. You're trying to figure out your own life. You're trying to figure out your direction, that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I got bitten by the retro bug again. And that's when I started collecting machines again. I remember the first one I collected was it was at White's Farm, which is a flea market in Brookville, Indiana. And they're open on a couple of weekdays out of the week. And I remember me and a friend of mine got there bright early in the morning, and they always have an auction from 11 to noon. And it's probably still the same today. And I remember I saw this little box that had a 512K, a 512KE, a keyboard, an external floppy, is 400K in there. In the box up for the auction, it had one of the lot numbers on it. I'm like, we'll give it a shot. $20 bid on it. I was the only bidder. So I went home with a 512K and a KE, and I'm like, wow, this is cool. So I started picking it up again. Now, remember, this was right around the same time I got onto YouTube, learned about YouTube for the first time. And all of the OG YouTubers like UXW Bill, Brandon Bishop, PCM, and I started seeing their interest in vintage computing again from their youth. And I'm like, this is fun. So that's when I started doing Craigslist, and I found the LCs, the PowerBook 5300. I found a Quadra 700 for like $60, and I just kept accumulating from there. And I was going to the Hamvention, Dayton Hamvention, and I found even more. I remember there was a whole rack of nothing but Apple IIs and Compact Macs and PCs and K Pros. And this was like 2009, 2010. Not that long ago, even though it's been 15 years. Where's the time gone? Yeah, the whole rack, $5 to $15 a piece. So I got more stuff from there, and it just ballooned and ballooned and ballooned. And now I have a whole room full of vintage machines 15 years later. It's great. And I got really good at fixing them too, because that's the fun part about it for me anyways.
Well, let me ask you about this. We've talked so much about education. We've talked about people that have made a difference in your life and helped foster interests and things like that. It's
Sure.
as an electrical engineer, what sort of formal training do you have? And if it's self-taught, I mean that's fine. That's how I've learned most of my skills.
Yep.
But
Yep. Yep.
how do you feel is the best way for people that are interested in that topic to kind of get started?
Here's my opinion. Now, this is just my own projection on the situation, but the way it worked for me was I already had a vested interest in this stuff. I already had like the knack for it.
Mhm.
Like I just wanted to do it. But let's say you don't, but you kind of do, especially for the young kids out there that are just getting started who's watching this stuff. My personal opinion is you learn by doing, but also you learn by hyperfixation. So for me, I already had most because I did go to college.
Mhm.
I did a 2-year program. I was going to do my bachelor's program. I was enrolled into the 4-year. I got 2 years in, I got my associates, but then I graduated during the crash of '08, and I
Yeah.
didn't have the resources or financial power to keep going into the bachelor's program. So I was taking a gap year, but then I'm like, well, I couldn't find employment. My student loans went into default because I ran out of forbearances. Because first I did a consolidation to buy me some time, then I did
Mhm.
forbearances and stuff like that, and then it's a whole story for another time. So I didn't continue on, but I knew a lot going into college to the point where I was testing out of classes, and actually I hit a limit on how many I can test out of per semester because
Sure.
colleges want to make money too, right? So yeah, I tested out of this one and this one and this one. Like, so sorry, we got to be scheduled for at least 3 classes. I'm like, well, so I just did it. But my personal opinion is you got to have the energy and the hyperfixation into wanting to do it. It's like I want to learn this. I need to figure it out, and then the way it worked for me, everyone's different, but the way it worked for me was the F around and find out thing. So it's like, hey, I have a board here. What does this do? Let's figure it out. Whoa, ow, that's getting hot. Well, I just learned that this there's something wrong with this chip here. So let's figure it out. Let's swipe around. Let's build it. See what it does. That's what I did with the electronic kits when I was a kid with Radio Shacks. Like, hey, you got a kit here. You've got the book that tells you how to build these circuits, right? But then it's like, well, hey, I have a schematic. It kind of teaches you how to read a schematic. So I was reading schematics by the time I was 10 years old. But then I'm like, well, what if I change this wire? Or what happens if I add this extra capacitor in here? Or what happens if I take this resistor out and hook a potentiometer to it and start adjusting that pot? Well, hey, I can change the pitch of this siren thing that I just built, or I can make these LEDs blink faster, or things like you just learn by doing. And it's like,
Mhm.
hey, that's kind of fun. And the key thing about that is when it feels fun and it gives you that sort of dopamine hit, you want more of it. So you tend to want to learn more. And it's like, oh, well, that's fun. Well,
Mhm.
what if I do this? Or what if I do this? And eventually leads into things like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was the dopamine hit for me was when at 9 years old, my dad gave me a boombox. It was a Fisher boombox, and I still have the carcass of it. I bought another one down the line, but I still have the carcass of it. And it was a CD player boombox from the early 90s, and the CD player didn't work. And it come to find out what happens is where the board is mounted to the top of the unit, there's like plastic pegs that come through. Well, there's an issue where they tend to crack. The circuit board tends to crack around those plastic standoffs, and when it does, it breaks the traces, so the CD player or whatever it is doesn't work. Well, I was trying to figure that out at 9 years old, and I played with it, and of course, you're not going to get it right first try, so I had to retry and learn what I was doing. But then the feeling, the good feeling I got from seeing that player actually play a CD again at 9 years old, when you're like, you know what? I did that. I made that thing work again. It's like, it's a euphoria. And that's what it's like a big snowball running downhill. It's the best way I can explain it. So
yeah.
Back on topic, it's like the best way to get started is to learn by doing and make sure you get the reference material and a mentorship that you need to kind of help guide you along. And that is why I do the YouTube videos that I do, so I can get the information out there as learning material and lessons for people that want to troubleshoot things and repair things.
Absolutely. And as somebody that's a longtime viewer of your videos, I really appreciate that you will go into, you're not afraid to get into the weeds. You'll absolutely be like, we're going to troubleshoot this, and this is the steps we went through, and this was the frustrating thing that I hit. And if you hit a little brick wall on something, you leave it in the video. Thank you. Yes. I always get frustrated because I will see, and I know that there's a pushback on that people will be like, well, you edit your videos, why wouldn't you take that out? And it's like, because not everything works every time.
No, it's not. It's not. It's like,
there's sometimes frustration.
Yes, it's not. It's like there's a lot of cookie cutter videos out there. It's like, well, it's fixed now. No. I go through the whole process without being too wordy. I get like directly to the point. It's like, here's what I did. Here's maybe a meter reading or a scope shot of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then the key thing here is, though, it's like when you are physically, because the thing about electronics is all theory and science and math, right? You can't physically see it. You can't touch it. You can't, it's just there in a plane of existence. And it's like, you can't create that. But when you're working with it and you're playing with it and you're seeing the results, you start to understand how the virtual and the physical domains interconnect. So then it's like you start to understand how the circuitry works. You understand the function of a switch mode power supply. You understand the theory behind digital logic states and transitions and timing parameters. You start to understand analog circuitry, like how does an audio power amplifier work? What are all the classes? Class A, Class AB, Class GH, Class D, things like that. You start to understand all of these things. So even without a schematic like this board, say we don't have a schematic for the 550 board. So even like you can look at this board, and the way my brain works is I can look at this board and immediately what comes to my mind within like 5 seconds is this board is like New York City. You see all the buildings, you see all the streets, you see all of the traffic flowing and the pedestrians walking, and you can kind of understand systematically how this board works. Even if you've got all of these custom chips, you can still, it's still old enough that you can systematically see how this board works. Oh, we have ROM over here. We have RAM over here. We have our central processing unit over here. We have our glue logic that performs all of the operations necessary to connect all of this together. You understand the basic building blocks of this board, so you can start to understand, okay, well, what's the symptom? Like a doctor, what's the symptom? All right, well, there's corrupted video on the screen. Well, there's several possibilities of why that could be. Well, we understand the architecture of a computer. Well, what generates video? Well, you need video memory. You need some kind of RAM. You need timing access between RAM and the system logic. You need the actual system logic itself. Sometimes it depends on the architecture of the machine. And there's a lot of things you need. And you start eliminating stage by stage where you think the fault is based on how the symptoms reacts with different given inputs. It's experimentation, really. It's like, think of when you're in school, you do a thesis. You have your thesis and you have your scientific method to get down to your end result to prove your thesis, right? It's something we learned back in high school. Same concept applies here. You just keep going at it, and it's like, okay, well, is the oscillator bad? Or, okay, we're having problems with black screen. Well, how does that work in this particular instance? And you've got to study the design. You've got to, once you do this enough time, I've been doing it for 30 years since I was 9 years old. So I've done it for long enough that I just know how these circuits work. But that still doesn't mean I don't get stumped, because I am human and I get stumped all the time. It's like, well, screw this thing. I don't want to. You just take a breather, go shift on something else. And a lot of times, especially seems to be a meme when you're on the toilet, not thinking about, oh crap, I didn't think about that. Come in there and it's like, Here, let me try this. Matter of fact, over the weekend, I was working on a Toshiba T1200 laptop, and those things are notorious for capacitors leaking and destroying the power supply modules beyond repair. So I patched everything up. I'm not seeing anything, but for some reason, I would turn it on. Sometimes the light would come on, it would stay on for a second or two and it'd shut off. Sometimes it'd come on and stay on for 10 seconds. It was not making any sense. And I couldn't figure it out. All my voltages were on. I was frustrated. I'm like, grr. But then I came back to it. I'm like, you know what? Let me check something. So I checked the voltage going out to the RAM because those older machines had a battery, like a standby battery, one of those big stick batteries. And those standby batteries will, power the suspend states and stuff like that. And that's a separate 5 volts. I'm like, well, let me check that. Check that. Well, that 5-volt supply was hovering at 4.5. I'm like, well, that's already odd. I hit the power button, it'd fall down to 2.6 volts before going up. I'm like, that's not going to work. That already is a problem. And there's no schematics on the board. So I chased that back to a little tiny surface mount part known as a low dropout regulator. It's a 5-volt regulator that's tied back into that backup battery circuit. I'm like, I'm going to bet that regulator is bad because I looked at the input voltage going into it, 6.8 volts, rock solid. I'm like, there you go. So I pulled that regulator out, ordered a new one. I had to cross match the part. And that's another part of this too. You either have to get the original parts or you have to study what the original part was and then look at data sheets and try to find an equivalent. And I did. I found a modern equivalent, stuck that in there, problem solved. The machine works perfect. I'm like, well, there you go. That's
awesome. I know a lot of this just sounds like magic to people, but I guess if you really have an interest and you're willing to learn the fundamentals that and have an eye for troubleshooting or just the patience for troubleshooting, it sounds like this is something that people can really get into.
Skills. And you got to build that up with time, and it takes experience to do that. It really does.
Absolutely. Well, you've got. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I said you just probe for results. It's like,
yeah,
you got expected behavior and you got actual behavior. Okay, that correlates. Oh, no, that doesn't correlate. Well, what if I do this? Well, that let the magic smoke out. What if I do this? Yeah, this is how you learn. This is how I did it anyway.
Yeah. But you've talked about like it's all this experience and building things up in your education and just playing with things and figuring out how they work and looking at these machines as kind of like little cities almost, and that's a great way to put it. But you've used that experience to make some really interesting products over the years that have helped out people like myself. Like the RAM upgrade for the Macintosh Portable. And there's a lot of neat stuff that you've made over the years that have sort of filled gaps and stuff where people have needed things. Like I know that you recently were working on some PowerBook projects, and there was at one point that you had sort of reverse engineered like one of those soft power on boards or something for one of the power supplies and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Has there been
the little hybrid module in the Macintosh Portable bricks? Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So has there been a project like that where you have just felt like whatever this was, this project, this product you're trying to produce, something, it just felt like impossible, but then you had one of those eureka moments and you pulled it off in the end? What is maybe one of those fun stories?
If there's a lot of them, but the one I think for me that tops it all off is the WeatherStar 4000. Mm-hmm. So the WeatherStar 4000, for those of you who don't know, was a machine that was used at the Weather Channel. Mm-hmm. And for the American viewers, the Weather Channel was it's still around. It was a channel dedicated for 24/7 weather. But the novel thing about that channel is no matter where you were in the country, which hotel you're in, which house you were in, you turn on the Weather Channel, and the local on the 8s would come up, and it was the weather graphic screen that would pop up specific to where you were viewing that at. And when I was a child, it really blew my mind. Like, how in the world does all of this work? Again, it falls into that same hyperfixation because I've always had this little tertiary interest in meteorology, which dates back to when I was 4, I think 3 or 4, because I lived in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest, so we get tornado warnings and stuff like that. And then I remember I was standing on top of my toy box in the trailer when I was 3, and the sirens, woo, like, what is going on? And it seemed the lightning crashing and the rain. And I was always fascinated from that point forward, like, whoa. There was just something about that. So, of course,
just the power of nature. Yeah,
exactly. So I would watch the Weather Channel growing up. And I remember the big full screen scrolls that show the alerts and rolls and all this stuff back in the 90s. And it's like, I was always fascinated how that worked. So fast forward, I learned that was the WeatherStar machine. More specifically in my youth, it was the WeatherStar 4000, which is what did the blue and orange gradients and, you know, all of that stuff. You can find that footage all over YouTube. Come to find out, those machines are very hard to get for obvious reasons. So I finally got one of those machines back in 2018. And when I did, I thought, it's like, this was like a childhood nostalgia, a childhood memory that was always intangible, not in the physical world. You couldn't touch it, couldn't feel it. All you have was what was on that screen, and it's a distant memory. So,
and that's honestly that's how I met you. If you probably don't remember, but it's a number of like VCF Midwest or a VCF East many years ago, where I came and checked out your WeatherStar setup.
Yep, we did the exhibit.
I know it's amazing.
And that project, I thought, was like, when I first got it, that's when I realized, like, it was a cool machine. It's like, it's got 268,000 processors in it. It was some custom crazy multi-board monstrosity. And the bad part about it was there was not a shred of documentation. There was no firmware. There was nothing. It was just a black box that was painted white. But the problem was the machine, I learned once I took it apart and saw what was going on, was RAM based. So software was downloaded and stored in RAM, and none of that was archived. So I'm thinking, how? Oh boy. And it's like, I'm already in at $600 for the machine at the time, which is expensive, but I mean, they're super rare. So as soon as I've had a saved search for years, and as soon as I saw one pop up on eBay, I'm like, you know, send an offer, because the guy wanted 1,000 for it. I'm like, oh wait, it's a proprietary machine. Nobody's going to pay that. And the carrier for that machine was discontinued years ago. I finally got it in my hands, and once I realized what in the world, it's like, this is an impossible task. How in the world am I ever going to do this? That's when I decided to say, okay, well, this is fueled by spite and childhood nostalgia. This is fueled by my former electronic skills, my reverse engineering skills from prior hobbies, and things like that, my microcontroller programming skills and stuff like that. I'm like, you know what? If I can't get the program for this, I'm going to make one. And that's exactly what I did. So I had to reverse engineer all of the boards. And there's a Hackaday article on it. I reverse engineered all of the boards back down into schematics. So, which was painstaking, because I had to take a meter, beep, 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 you know, checkbox all my chip pins, write out a net list, and then copy that net list and start drawing up the schematic in CAD software. And once I had all of that, then I had to get the code, because there's the other thing about vintage computers is, in a lot of cases, they have these little combinational logic chips known as PALs or GALs. And I'm sure people in the vintage computer community know what those are. They obfuscate a lot of the logic and they hide it away. So I had to look, once I had the schematic, I had a better idea what the PALs are and what they do, because I can visually see that city and all the buildings and everything. So once I got those PALs, I built a dumper tool, and I dumped those PALs, and I used a Python script that looks at the bitstream dump of like a ROM style dump of the PAL and tries to make sense out of it and converts it back into equations. So once I had the equations, I could then apply that to the schematic, and I knew at that point, okay, well, this is an address decoder. This is an interrupt decoder. So, okay, now I have an address decoder. What are the ranges that these addresses are? So I started building a documentation sheet of the architecture of the machine. So once I had the architecture of the machine on all the boards, I could then develop a tool chain so I can start compiling code to run on this thing. And that's exactly what I did. I started probing the graphics card to learn how graphics are laid out in memory, how the original factory ROMs are doing, what they're doing to communicate. Because with the graphics card, because there's the frame buffer commands, there's the drawing command, you know, all of that stuff, like with any computer, right? Mm-hmm. So I had to learn the palette routines, the graphics routines, the frame buffer, double buffering, quadruple buffering stuff, all of that. Learn all of that, then write the code, test the code. Okay, where's some bugs here? Let's write some more rendering code. Let's write some more control code. And in order to do all of that, I had to design a data card. So I took the original data card, reverse engineered its design, and copied it over here, making necessary changes and bodges required to replace the old satellite host with a Raspberry Pi. Mm-hmm. And that is what talks to the machine. And once I got it all working, I literally recreated pixel by pixel the exact replication of what it was doing out in the field. And it sits there and runs again. And I look back at that because that was my pandemic project. I look back at that and I'm like, how in the world did I do that? How did I pull that off? Something that took teams to build back in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. One guy reverse engineered and built the software. How? Here we are, and it works.
It's that hyperfixation.
That's it. That's exactly it. It's being on the spectrum. And that's the other thing you'll notice in the vintage computer community is there's a lot of neurodivergency in here.
Yes.
You got to use those. People think of it as a mental disability, but it's not. There's hidden skills in that, and you have to learn what they are, and you have to cater to them. So if you're ADHD or something like that, it's like, okay, well, figure out what your dopamine hits are, and you play to it to your advantage.
Yeah.
Because this is the end result of that. I'm telling you, it works.
Absolutely. I think it's just super amazing that all of these things that it's like this thing where it's like, you know, I thought this was amazing as a kid, and I'm going to bring it back so that way that people can continue to enjoy it.
And then I started showing it off at VCFs, and then it was, people loved it. They absolutely loved it. The turnout at VCF East 2021, this was just after the pandemic. I didn't figure out the turnout was going to be that big, and it was. And people loved it, so we started coming back, and then we started doing all the other shows. And then I had other friends at the time who, same passion as I was in, is reverse engineering these machines, but they were the other machines, like the SGI versions of the WeatherStar, the XL, the IntelliStar, the original WeatherStar, you know, all of these. We all got together as a team of people, and we exhibited the entire platform, the whole ecosystem, and people were just, we're still doing it. It's awesome. It's an awesome experience. And if anyone goes to VCF, you should definitely check out that exhibit because it's great.
Yeah. It's 8 of the best tables at any of these events.
8.
I don't know that it's 8 tables, but it's a lot of tables.
Yeah,
you got to admit.
It's a lot. And now we're adding all the cable TV stuff into the mix too. It's getting pretty elaborate. So it's fine. It's fine.
It's really amazing though. Don't undersell it. And if you folks at home listening, if you do have a chance to make it to VCF East or VCF Midwest, to any of these shows, you're typically going to bump into the WeatherStar crew there, and they always are super nice and want to share their love of this old hardware with you and take you on a full tour. I remember the first time that I kind of came up and I was like, oh my gosh, like I absolutely remember this and all the vaporwave music and things like that. And you were like, oh, come over here. Yeah. And you just ripped the machine apart and you started telling me about all the hardware. And I was like, I said, this is way over my head. You were like, don't worry, it was over my head too at one point.
Well, it captures a lot of people too, because it's like they remember what it was like while I turned on the Weather Channel before I head to work to see what the rain or what the weather.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that screen. I remember this stuff. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
now you can physically see the physical domain and what it took to actually run that platform. You see the physical hardware, and you just don't think about things like that. It's like, okay, well, I like vintage Macs, I like the 68K stuff, but it's like, did you know there was a pair of 68Ks that ran this hardware that you watched every time you turned on the Weather Channel and you wanted to look at your local radar back in 1995? You know, there was two 68Ks displaying that.
Mm-hmm. I think it blows people's mind too. Just the whole idea that something had a 68,000 in it, but was color. And I think people that come at it from the Mac side don't always realize that. But Amiga people were like, what are you talking about?
Well, the other thing too is the machine's design was ratified in 1985 and it went to production in 1988. And to have full triple buffer, multiple overlay, 768 by 480, 256 color, basically VGA, super VGA graphics in 1988 is impressive. With palette animation rotation, which people that programmed games in the old days probably know that you used palette swapping to make believe, animations all the time, like the rainbow logos and stuff like that. Because hardware limitations, you can't draw those frame buffers in real time like that. You got to do trickery to make it look like there's real animation happening here. The WeatherStar was no exception. So to do all of that in hardware was impressive for 1988. So
absolutely,
the engineering team behind it, hats off to them. I'd love to talk to them someday, but most of them are gone or out of touch. It's been 40 plus years. It happens.
It does, and I think that's why it's important to try to get those stories out while we still can. Talk to people, hear their stories, listen to their experience, and make sure that all of this is available for people in the future when I'm not around and when you're not around, so that way that we can keep sharing the hobby forever.
It's one of the reasons why I do the YouTube videos I do, is to get the knowledge out there for people to learn from, and it's there for people to always refer to, because we're human beings. We're not going to be here forever. We've got a very small period of time where we're on this planet. And the way I look at it too is I'm in for preservation, but also leaving it all trapped inside this head does nobody no good if I take it to the grave. It really doesn't. And it's death, unfortunately, is a part of life, and you've got to make sure that in the event of your death, your legacy is preserved, and this is one way to do it, because it's out there, it's archived. It's the things like the Computer Chronicles. Yeah, it's heavily dated, but the point is, it's information that's important because you can get to see a window into the past of how things were, what was relevant, and how it applies to today. You know what I mean? Even if the guy's long since passed on, like Gary Kildall is a prime example. That was a whole unfortunate thing. That was really unfortunate.
I was going to say that it's one of those things, like that's the way that people have to remember Gary these days. It's Stuart is still with us, but but having Gary around to ask questions would be amazing.
I would have loved to have met Gary and just shot the breeze with him. It's just unfortunate we don't have him anymore. And then
it is
the whole drama associated with all of that. It's so unfortunate. It really is.
It is. Well, let's talk about something positive though, and I think that's and you were talking about protecting your legacy and getting that information and stuff out there. You've got a really great YouTube channel. You've been at the game for a long time. I just wanted to maybe talk to you about what your process is for maybe like creating videos, what software you use to edit, and then how you kind of seen viewership like grow and sometimes things ebb and come back and all of that, but what your kind of most successful videos have been.
That's pretty loaded to think about, but I will say this. In the beginning, I used very minimal editing, and I still kind of do, because for me, it's not so much about the fluff more so than it is the content. It's just like shoot from the hip, and all of that, because it's like the original YouTube style that was popular 15 plus years ago. These days, a lot of videos, they look like episodes straight out of a TV. They're professionally edited. There's the Ken Burns effect and all of this other stuff. And there's a place for that because it engages audience retention. So you have several thousand views per video.
Right.
But the amount of overhead to pull something off is not something that I have a passion in. My passion, and I find it as an energy vampire. I don't like putting energy into it. This is where my skill set is, right here. So when I do my videos, I focus on this, and I do very minimal editing that I can. And it has its trade-offs because it's not popular. It really is not. I only get a few hundred views.
Dude, we're doing an interview right now. I'm going to say that it's at least popular with me.
It's popular.
And I appreciate the fact, and I don't take this as an insult. Your videos are utilitarian by design because you respect your audience's time. There's a lot of videos I'll watch out there. It's an hour-long video with 10 minutes of content.
Yes, it might be a small audience, but it's the audience that wants to watch this stuff.
Yeah, it's dedicated. You found the right people.
It's a dedicated audience.
Get it. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Precisely. That's it. And then I just use DaVinci, or I was using OpenShot, but I found it to be very buggy, especially with frame rate differences causing glitches and audio lag and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, well, Big Bad Biologist gave me a new machine out of the kindness of his own heart. So I put that to use. And then I run DaVinci on that guy to do all my editing now. And DaVinci is very powerful. I'm still trying to get used to it. Triple I DIY has been a saint in that department to help teach me to do some of the tips and tricks with it. But it works, right? And that's what I use now. And I've got a couple overhead cams I try to mix in there. I've done some recent time-lapse videos where I will show the recapping and stuff like that. I tend to cut that stuff out because it's a lot of fluff, but I decided to make some videos with that in there, but I made it a time-lapse to respect people's time.
To time compressed, Yes,
I just compressed that in there, so if people want to watch it as kind of an ASMR thing, they can, or they can just skip right past it, They have the option to do so.
I like that they've added, and it's been there a while. I'm saying this as if this was just put on last week, but the ability to have chapters in your videos. So a lot of creators now will have a thing where it's like, hey, if you just want to get right to this, skip to this time mark or hit this chapter, and you'll get right to whatever that next thing is.
I've got a couple videos out there I did chapters on, and I'll try to do chapters like that on the really long ones. Because I've had some videos that have run an hour and 30 minutes or more, which is kind of excessive. And then when it gets, but there's a lot of information in it. And then when it gets to that point, I just chop it up into chapters. Because one thing I've noticed is I've tried both ways. I've done the long video with chapters, but I've also done the part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. It's with the parts, it's hard to keep people engaged throughout those parts, because I've noticed recently, I've been doing a lot of PowerBook 100 stuff.
Yes, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of the PowerBook 100 stuff, and I've been uploading parts on that series, and I'm losing viewers for each part that goes on. So I've got to mix it up with other stuff in between.
Well, you've got one viewer. This is the PowerBook 100 that you fixed for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's in the same part series, I'm pretty sure.
I have bought like 5 or 6 of these over the years, trying to get a work.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really great to have one that actually is all
we
together.
Built one out of nothing but parts. And I think FrodoJedi came in clutch with that one, too.
Yeah. And
finally got one with all of enough parts to make something work.
I wanted to show you something else. Since I got you here, you might recognize the back of this machine. Yep. This is Frank's PowerBook 160. He sent this to me for showing off, knowing that we were going to do a little interview. This is another great one that you restored that has a working screen, and it's got the blue SCSI with Wi-Fi, so you can absolutely set it up to where
it's already got the hinge repair done to it. It's got the battery mod done to it. And I put the battery mod on the rear so it's less intrusive because it's on the back side.
Yeah, absolutely. So you keep your PRAM and all that. And there's a little 3D printed board that you made that has a SD card reader for the Blue SCSI.
Blue SCSI. And I think
Make it
that was
easy. You
based
don't have to
off
take the whole machine
3D
apart.
model. Yeah, that was based off the 3D model that you did, I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah. But and a Japanese keyboard. So
yeah, there you go.
Arigato THEtechknight Roboto.
Yeah, there you go. And it's fixed. It's good to go.
Yeah, and it's an amazing little machine. So
I've learned a lot with working on those PowerBooks. I've been in PowerBook hell or heaven, depending on which way you look at it, the last month or so. And I've learned a lot. I've actually learned that the 165C and the 180C CPU cards are the same. The only difference is the 165C has an extra chip on it that converts the timing information from the Western Digital chip over to a passive matrix display. Mm-hmm. But I know on the 180C card, there's one resistor that they move that tells the declaration ROM that we're going to be running in TFT mode. And then you pull that chip off and then you remove a couple resistor networks from here over to there. And now you have a 180C CPU card. Who knew?
Yeah. Who knew?
That's the fun thing about, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Now we just need somebody to make really cheap reproduction RAM for the color PowerBooks, for the 100 series color PowerBooks, because that seems to be the holdup for a lot of people.
Yes,
I got a machine, but I got 4 megs of RAM.
The problem there is, the one thing that's unfortunate is with the PowerBooks, the footprint for the RAM, the pinout's the same between all of them, but the footprint is different for the different models. For example, the 165C and the 180C has a specialized footprint for the RAM. And the reason why they did that is because where the RAM would normally go on like 140, 145, 160, and therefore they put a ROM and expansion card right there where the expansion RAM would normally go. So it interferes. So the design spec for this 165 and 180C requires you to loop the RAM this way, and nobody makes it. There's I think there's, what is it? Silicon something out.
Silicon Insider does make.
Yeah, he makes the PowerBook RAM, but he doesn't make the C series RAM.
Yeah,
I think though, they make modern BJs, and Androida used it once for the portable. They're like 8 megabyte little tiny BGAs. And I think with a pair of those, because they're 16-bit chips, so they give you 32-bit. A pair of those, you can make a very skinny card that will go on all of them. So that right there is the way to do it.
Yep. I just the thing you were describing earlier, I think it's called the cousin card. They've got some weird names on the PowerBook stuff, because you got the motherboard that's the same among like a couple
of
the
series, them are the same.
And then like on the later ones, you got the you got the motherboard, and then you've got the daughter card, and then you've got the cousin card, and it's just like Apple, you're running out of relatives at this point.
Yeah, and you want to know what's funny about those PowerBooks? Something that I've learned, and this comes with experience tinkering around too, that all of those 100 series PowerBooks have basically the same exact power supply design as the original backlit portable. Same thing. They just tweaked a few things here and there, so it didn't need to rely on the main battery being present. But the circuitry, the op amps, the resistor network, they're all the same. It's the same exact design. It's crazy to think about. And then the Duo,
they engineered it once, and they're like, how many times we can use it, right?
Yeah, they just carbon copied it with a couple tweaks here and there to improve it, so it wasn't as unreliable. But then they came out with the Duo line, which is the funny thing about the Duo line is a completely radically different design, a completely different DC-DC stage. They must have hired a different team to work on the Duo, because there's no similarities whatsoever. There just isn't, except for the graphics chip. They used the same graphics chip on the grayscale model Duos as they did with the 165 and the 160. But and it's a proprietary chip. There's no data sheet on it. Can't find the pinout. That's just how it goes sometimes.
Sounds right.
Yep.
I'm one of those people I'm one of the 3 people on earth that love the PowerBook 150 and that's kind of more like a Duo, but then
Yeah,
also
it's
sort of like a 100 series
well, the
PowerBook.
150, the 150 was the one PowerBook that Apple made that they 100% outsourced. And if I'm not mistaken, the 150 is actually made by Acer. It's an Acer machine that is built to Apple specs.
Yep.
And it's got that same garbage plastic that
Yeah.
everything else had in that time period. It's just like peanut brittle. Entropy, you know?
Yeah. Speaking of entropy, that's a perfect thing to go out on. TechKnight, how are you fighting entropy, and how can other people join you in the mission?
Oh, entropy is like, I say that word a lot lately all over the internet. And the thing about entropy is you're fighting it from two fronts, essentially. Because the thing about time is time, everything succumbs to time. We succumb to time. It all succumbs to time. The problem with semiconductors and stuff like that is you got two fronts here. You've got moisture absorption, and we're already starting to see, and have been for a while, a lot of the 60s, 1960s, and 70s stuff where enough moisture has absorbed into the chip from sitting dormant that they become noisy. In the analog world, you hear that noise. In the digital world, you either that noise represents as erratic or stuck bits, which is why you get 74 series gates that you got an AND gate that has an output stuck high or stuck low, or one of the inputs isn't registering or whatever, or things like that. It's because of the leakage currents that are being formed in the chip die from moisture absorption. So that's one front. And then it affects DRAM first. You notice people, when working on computers, it's always the RAM that's bad, like the Micron RAM and all of this. And it's because DRAM is capacitive. And one thing about capacitors, regardless if it's in a silicon chip or out here externally, capacitors, when they absorb moisture, they become leaky electrically. And because they become electrically leaky, they bleed off charge at a much more rapid pace than they would normally, because there's now resistance in the gate. And the problem with that is on DRAM, when you lose, when a gate of a RAM cell becomes leaky, technically, in order to keep that charge in the RAM cell, you have to refresh it faster, which is not something these machines are going to do. So now that RAM cell has failed. It won't hold a bit. So then you got bad RAM. So then you got to replace the RAM. So that's the first that gets affected. It eventually affects, chips like that. And that's just, and I'm worried as time goes on, it's going to start affecting these custom ICs, which we have no documentation on. Right now, I've not run into a bad ASIC, but eventually these will absorb enough moisture where we're going to start having weird malfunctions occurring here. So the one way to stop that, though, is either obviously you can seal it and vacuum pack desiccant bag and keep changing the desiccant out, which is not really practical. Or you can keep it powered up and all of the chips warm. When you keep the chips warm, it will keep and drive the moisture out. This is also why when you buy parts new, sometimes you get them sealed in the bag and it says sealed date XYZ. If you open the bag, you got to bake the parts. That's why the epoxy absorbs moisture. In fact, this board in particular, I have an X on the CPU because this board is moisture damaged by being in the ocean. The salt air got to it. But because of that, this chip absorbed enough moisture that while this machine was running, the chip shorted internally. And this chip is now shorted, so I have to replace it. So that's one thing. The other thing, too, is while it's running, the other entropy front is electromigration. And anyone that's familiar with the Commodore 64 and the SID chips and the PLAs and all of that, those chips are dying in droves because they run hot all the time. Well, it's just from die manufacturing issues. Bill Hurd's gone into this before. And then you have the electromigration issues where the molecules of it's like an electrolysis effect, where atoms from this metal plane continually leave to this one over here. So this metal gets thinner and thinner and thinner while this one builds up in thickness. So then the transistor junction inside the chip will eventually malfunction or short internally. Much more rare for that to happen. It's up to scientific debate which one will happen first, electromigration or moisture absorption. So is it better to leave the computers on running all the time to keep the moisture out? Or is it better to just leave them in the environment and then seal them in the back? We don't really know. I mean, who's doing the legwork on that? It's up for debate. But my job is to try to fight that entropy wave is back as far as I can. But regardless what we do, it's coming anyways. The ultimate future is going to be the Mr. FPGA or the Micro Pico Mac or things like that. That's the ultimate future. Ultimate future. If I have a word of advice for anyone starting out in the field, learn silicon engineering. Learn, taking pictures of these, like Travis Goodspeed does that. And there's a few other. Reverse engineer the gates, document the gate array logic in here, convert that into Verilog, system Verilog, VHDL for FPGA replacements. That's where ultimately we're going to have to be headed, because it would be nice to build a board that's 100%, logic exact one-to-one, but instead of this custom VLSI chip here, we have an Altera FPGA. So we have an Altera FPGA here, and then the SWIM chip, we've got another small scale FPGA implementing its functions, but the board still looks the same. So you still have that retro vibe, and it still functions exactly one-on-one, because even today, emulation is not perfect. There's bugs in Basilisk 2. There's bugs in QEMU. It's not perfect. You can't, until someone reverse engineers the hardware one-on-one, you're going to have these little things. But that's the ultimate future. But in the meantime, we'll just try to keep these going ahead. That's all you can do, really. And that's what I'm here for. First.
Leave your machine on all the time, and that simulation is the future.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I mean, that's who knows what's going to really happen, but that's my thoughts. It's up for debate.
Yeah. Well, that's really great. TechKnight, I really want to thank you for taking time and chatting with me. I know that you've got other things going on this evening, and so we can kind of wrap things up. But I did want to ask one last question. Where can people find you online, and what services do you offer to people out in the vintage and retro computing world that they might take advantage of these days?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Discord. I'm on Discord. I'm on Discord more than I am on forums and stuff like that these days. But you can hit me up on like 68K, Macintosh Liberation Army, Tinker Different. I have my own Discord server, which I've advertised on my YouTube channel before. There's multiple ways you can get a hold of me by email, which you can find on my YouTube channel. But I do repairs. I mean, for me, I can't do a whole bunch of them at one time because otherwise I get overloaded. But I have the weekends, I have the evenings and the afternoons. So I tend to just take on work as it comes along, because the other thing that's missing in today's society are analog and power supply CRT repair technicians. And that's especially CRT repair technicians. A lot of them are retiring. There's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with working on them or don't really understand the electronics very well. And the sad reality is a lot of the technicians that did this for a living are unfortunately no longer with us, or they're retired, and that knowledge is being lost to time. And that's another one of my missions is when I do CRT repairs, I try to document everything I can and get it out there so people can learn from it. So I tend to take on CRT repair, analog board repair, and I also specialize in power supply repair, because there's a lot of these switch mode power supplies that are proprietary that aren't as easily replaceable with Meanwell and whatever else that I work on. I fixed a couple Apple network server power supplies that were not functioning correctly, and it's all fun. And then I take on, logic board repairs and recaps and stuff like that. But primarily I tend to focus on the less so on the recap and goes, and more so on the, well, this has a weird problem and it's not quite working right, and can you take a look at it? Sure, I'll see what I can figure out, that kind of thing. I'm not against the recap and goes, but at the same time, it's like, well, I have an analog board, it's got this issue going on with it. Can you help me figure it out? Sure, that's what I'm here for. And I do a video on it in the process, and then I put it out there.
Absolutely.
So that's just it. I got all these repair services I do. Sometimes I'll do consulting services, like the PowerBook Duo keyboard and little things like that. The Macintosh portable RAM, but
Yeah,
not all that often. But I kind of am open to it, so
very cool.
it's
Well,
fun.
yeah, I will make sure to have links to all your social media and YouTube and stuff like that down in the comments. Again, Tech Knight, thank you so much. And
Well,
everybody at home, I just want to make sure that make sure you subscribe to his channel. Make sure you follow him on social media to see all the latest stuff. Any last words?
check me out, and if you need anything repaired, I'm your guy.
Great. Thank you again. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
It's night all. See ya.